Our first analyst will be Daniel Lattimore, who is a Senior Vice President of the Banking Group at Solent. He'll be kicking us off today with his first 7 minutes. Following him, we will have Allison Clark, the Principal Analyst at Forrester. Dan, actually, you want to sit in the close seat here, yeah. Allison, as I said, Principal Analyst at Forrester with more than 19 years of financial services experience. We have Jacob Yeager, Senior Vice President and Banking and Head of Strategy at Javelin. After him, we will have Jim Maroos of the Financial brand, and you will likely have seen his works in a variety of places. We've got Ron Shevlin, the Head of Research at Cornerstone Advisors, another person who I'm sure you've all seen on the Twitter feed from time to time. We've got Kevin Morrison, Senior Research Analyst with ITE, and he's got over 20 years of experience as well. Stessa Cohen, the Research Director at Gartner, and her areas of expertise include thought leadership and business strategies for digital banking, mobile banking, online banking, digital banking, personal finance management. So obviously a lot of overlap with the Finovate crowd. And then wrapping us up today will be James Wester, the Research Director for IDC Financial Insights. We're incredibly happy to have all of this amazing talent up here on stage, and I'm going to turn it over now to Daniel, who will go ahead and get us started. Take it away.
Great, thanks, Rick. Well, thanks everyone. It is great to be here and to finally have the opportunity to kick off an analyst panel at Finovate. I will tell you that just as there was an over-under of about 7.5 for the gongs, with 8 of us up here, that over-under is still 7.5 on the gongs. So I'd like to get started to talk to you about some of the key fintech opportunities we're seeing at Solent based on our research. And let me back up. What is fintech? It's kind of obvious. They're financial services, and then there's technology. But the key part that isn't in the word is people. Banks have got to keep in mind the human aspects of fintech in everything they do, both for their customers and for their employees. So over the last 76 presentations, I took a few notes, jotted down a few words of every one of the presentations. And the number one term I came up with was employee efficiency. 16 of the presentations dealt with that in one way or another. Platform and security and planning were high, omni-channel authentication, marketing, corporate banking, analytics, a wide range of things. And now that plays nicely into what's going on with retail banks. We have asked every 2 years for the last 8 years, retail banks, what are your top strategic priorities? And just last December, number 5 was fraud and risk management. It's important, but it's not a top strategic priority. Coming in next were regulatory compliance, cost reduction, and sales results. Sales results was surprising. That had always been number 1. This year, for the first time, customer relationships were number 1 at 70%. And that bears out what we've been seeing in our conversations with banks, but it's good to see it borne out by data. So customer satisfaction is the top strategic retail priority for banks today. Now, we then asked what technologies are going to help you achieve those goals. And not surprisingly, number 1 was mobile banking channel development. But what was surprising, 96% of people said that, and that's very unusual to get such unanimity. Next, though, the next 5 were omni-channel delivery, measuring and optimizing the customer journey, personalization, predictive analytics, and branch channel transformation. All of those relate to the customer experience. And interestingly for us, because I always like to look at the last one, AI was nominated only by 6% of the people. Not because it's not important, but because if you're not a top-tier bank, a tier 1, you just generally don't have the expertise or the resources to address AI when you've got all this other stuff on top of it that you've got to deal with first. So pay attention to it, but don't panic if you are not in the throes of an AI implementation yet. So customer experience technologies clearly were a key area of focus. We did see omni-channel, we did see branch, and we think the branch still has a vital role to play. So we asked in December, for the second time in 2 years, what are the key branch technologies and your plans for adoption? Now, what was interesting was that a few of these dropped down over the last 2 years. So tablet has declined. from 92 to 77%. Still high, but it's a lot harder to implement than just tossing an iPad at branch personnel. Assisted self-service devices, video conferencing, video teller machines, all have dropped down, and they're all kind of whiz-bang. What was still important were cash recycling, digital signage, Wi-Fi for customers, things that aren't going to happen at Finovate, but banks still need to pay attention to. What was interesting, paperless loan and account origination, 83% looking at that, and that's something we saw a lot of over the last couple of days. So in the branch, there's a level of pragmatism, focusing on efficiency and effectiveness as banks think about how to invest as they reconfigure their branch system. Now, part of that involves changing people's behavior. And if you all are familiar with the UK, in October of 2013, they made it very easy to switch accounts. Banks had to invest an immense amount of money in it. You can go into a bank and switch accounts in 7 days with very little effort on your part. So you'd think this would lead to a lot of switching. This is the month-by-month breakdown. It hasn't increased at all, and this is, what does this really mean? It's very low, 2.5% switched in 2014, down to 2.03% on an annualized basis this year. It is hard to get people to switch. They are slow to change, particularly when there's an existing product that works well enough. And that's why with Apple Pay and mobile wallets and EMV, we here in the US are having such a tough time. The other thing that came up a lot was security. And how do we reconcile the need to have a great customer experience with the need to be secure? A lot of talk about that. As a conceptual framework, we'd suggest think about the trade-off between the two. And typically, you've had to figure out where on the blue line you want to be. With new technology, you can shift that line out to the orange line and have a better range of choices. Now, customer experience at the end of the day, in our view, is the differentiating banking product. Technology is going to be commoditized. At some point, most banks will have great digital user interfaces. The products will be pretty close and people can shop them, but how you treat your customers and the experience you give them digitally and in the branch and in the call center and through your other connections as you push out notifications will be critical. The other part of this, though, the key part of the customer experience is employees, from the top all the way to your frontline employees. How can fintech be used there? Our 3 high-level takeaways on that: RPA, natural language processing, natural language generation. You've got to give employees who are tough to find, tough to recruit, tough to keep the really good ones, keep them interested and engaged, let them focus on higher value stuff. And keep in mind that you've got to change them as well. So improving that employee experience, we think, is critical. And it involves change management. So I'd leave you with a final quote as we think about the need to stay human and think about the human aspects. If you want to build a ship, don't drum up people to collect wood and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. Thanks.
Thank you very much. That was Daniel Lattimore getting us started. Up next, we have Alison Clark.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I'm Alison Clark, and I'm a principal analyst with Forrester Research, actually based here in New York City, despite my very thick Australian accent that you hear here today. I actually serve customers not just in North America, but also around the world in financial services and also technology vendors too. For those that don't know Forrester, we actually work with business and technology leaders to develop customer-obsessed strategies that drive growth. And we also collect data on 80% of the world's GDP consumers, which means we know a lot about consumers, we know a lot about customers, we know what they're thinking, and we know how they're interacting with technology and what they're after. Now, this little baby's 10 years old this year, so happy birthday to the iPhone. And a lot's changed, of course, since this device was put into our hands all of those years ago. I'm sure many of you in the room will admit that the way you do business has changed, the way you interact with your customers and the way that customers interact with you. Well, if you think the change that's happened in the last 10 years has been a lot to digest, put on your seatbelts and buckle up, because we're in for a tough ride. At Forrester, we believe that the next 10 years is going to generate change that is far greater than we've seen in the last 10 years. The magnitude is going to be absolutely phenomenal. It's going to come at us faster than we think and faster than we expect. And in fact, a lot of this change is going to come from emerging technology that's going to have massive disruptive potential, both in terms of perhaps creating a major advantage for your competitors, in terms of changing industries, and also in changing the world. And in fact, if we just looked at the next 5 years, there's systems of engagement, as we call them, these sorts of technologies. There are systems of insight, and there's also systems of support. And all of these are going to create massive change in the industry and the way you do business. So how do you prepare for this? How do you prepare to take advantage of this emerging technology to create value for your business and value for your customers? How do you prepare your business for the future? Well, sadly, many financial services firms that I talk to spend way too much time focusing on new technology because they've got this fear of missing out and this fear of kind of not being on top of the latest and greatest. They're worried that they're going to miss out on something. And sadly, what they're not spending time on is the underlying fundamental barriers and obstacles that are inhibiting the change in their organisation, that's stopping them from innovating and actually stopping them from getting ahead. I think your biggest opportunity is to build strong foundations and leverage them to get ahead, to take advantage of emerging tech. And if we take just a look at some of these obstacles and barriers and some of the things that I think you should focus on, I mean, think about your organisation. What's stopping you from innovating and getting ahead? And I'm sure that for many of you in the room, you'll resonate with some, if not all of this list, right? Let's break this down a little. Well, we're looking at technology, we're looking at structure, we're looking at culture, and we're looking at process. And that's the areas where financial services firms have sadly been spending far too little time. So, where do I think your opportunity is? What do I think you should be doing? Firstly, you have to fix your culture gaps. Okay, culture has the most significant impact on your organisation. It's the biggest change. It's hard to measure and it's hard to change, and everybody keeps putting it in the too hard basket. You have to do more than talk the talk. You've got to give your leaders the skills to be able to take the culture forward. You have to implement programs of work that drive customer centricity and collaboration across the organisation as well as outside of the organisation. And you have to give your employees tools and the skills to be able to do this and enact it and take it forward. Linked closely to this is your firm's organisation structure. We have to break down these silos. We can no longer go forward being structured around product silos like we have been for the last 20, 30, 50 years. And in fact, we're already seeing leading firms like Ally Bank and Bank of Montreal reorganising themselves around the customer journey. And USAA, which is organising themselves around the customer goal. I mean, imagine, instead of organising around how we sell a customer a mortgage, imagine organising yourself around how you help them get into a home. And that creates a very different result and a very different dynamic. If we look at the firms that are leading in terms of driving this change in culture and driving the breakdown of the silos, they have what we call a customer-obsessed DNA. They're moving themselves from customer-aware to customer-led. So they're creating empathy for their customers and understanding them, and they don't just know where their customers are, they're thinking about where they're going to be 2, 3, 4, 5 steps ahead so they can predict where their customer is going to be. They're moving from being data-rich to insight-driven. I mean, big data is dead. The war is actually going to be won on insight. So you need robust systems of insight, business processes and technology that enable you to take data and turn it into insights in real time and put it in the hands of your employees. And of course, they're moving from perfect to fast and siloed to connected. All very difficult for financial services firms, but at the top, it is happening. The third thing you need to prepare for, to strengthen those foundations, to prepare for what's coming down the pipe in the future, is you have to ready your processes and your infrastructure. Your technology architecture needs to deal with this rapidly evolving and continuous change, and it needs to be set up for evolving business models, evolving processes, and ecosystems. And in fact, we're already seeing firms like CIBC, Scotiabank, and USAA, who are already great at delivering great customer experience to their customers, spending a lot of time investing in the back office, in the technology and the process, and setting up their infrastructure and doing things like shoring up their data infrastructure so that they're well prepared for the emerging technology and the changes that are ahead. And lastly, of course, embrace APIs. Those of you with legacy systems, this is going to help you uncouple your customer experience from your legacy system and be much nimbler in how you respond. But the biggest benefit going forward with the change that's coming at us is that it's going to enable you to better collaborate with your customers, your partners, and your suppliers. That's collaboration outside of your organization. So Forrester believes that the future is actually going to favor firms that are customer-obsessed and collaborative. And I think that your biggest opportunity is to invest in the foundations that support this. Thank you.
Nicely done. Thank you very much, Allison. Up next, we have Jacob from Javelin. Jacob, go ahead. Let's take a look at your 7 minutes.
Thank you very much. So when I was first asked to join this panel, I spent a bit of time thinking about what the topic was that I was going to present to you today. My knee-jerk reaction was to talk about something related to emerging technology. And those of you that know me know that I'm obsessed with it. I love it, and I love it how it's applied to financial services. And then I took a step back and I said, what can we do that's really important today that the industry isn't necessarily honing in on, where there's an opportunity for us to better serve customers? And there are two key segments that Javelin believes are important, where there's an opportunity to better serve clients: small businesses, and on the consumer side, baby boomers. These aren't typical segments, not ones that you'd normally find in an analyst presentation, because many of us are focused on emerging technology themes, ourselves included. Much of our research focuses on that. But the question that we have is, how can you apply emerging technology to these segments? My favorite tweet from day one of Finovate while the demos were going on were, how many times will I hear the word millennial today? So shout out to Emma Chase for playing right into my presentation. Thank you very much. This is exactly the reason that I've chosen to zone in specifically today on the boomer segment. So why baby boomers? There's a number of key reasons why we have an opportunity today in financial services to zone in and help this segment. And this goes beyond the classic, hey, let's help them with retirement planning. There's a lot more to it than that. First and foremost, and I'm going to do a fast drill into some stats in just a moment, they're users and adopters of smartphones. They use them, they have them, and not only that, they use digital banking, and I'll show you some stats on that. They have really complex financial needs. There's a lot going on for this segment. Everything from the classic retirement planning to things like unexpected expenses that pop up, the need to care for a loved one, the ability to be able to pay down student loans, whether they're for themselves or for a family member, so on and so forth. They really require assistance. There's a lot of advice that they need. There's a lot of guidance that they need. And we have an obligation in the financial services community to help all segments of the population. And this one needs a lot more attention. And this segment is one that needs to be served today. So a rapid dive into some stats. I often hear, hey, they're not users of digital. That comes up a lot. Absolutely not true. If you take a look at some of the data as far as their adoption of digital banking, for online banking, they're currently sitting at 70%, and they follow the same growth trajectory as the rest of the population. For mobile banking, the adoption has been slower, but look at how quick that growth curve at the bottom is moving. It's sitting at 40%. Through our digital banking benchmarking program, we ask consumers of all ages about their satisfaction with digital banking. And one of the questions we ask is, what's ease of use like? And for those at the bottom, for online banking, green scores denote the highest scores. They actually find online banking really easy to use. The mobile results are a lot more mixed. However, we do expect that to climb rapidly in conjunction with that rapidly accelerating adoption growth curve. When asked about their channel of choice, boomers say, we like to bank online, 52% in 2017. And their second choice, not surprisingly, is the branch. But it breaks down from there. As soon as we get past the point of transaction processing, in which the bank is more or less a utility, and into something like financial advice and guidance, which is a key requirement in financial services, we lose folks once they pass age 35. And when they asked, would you turn to your bank for financial advice? The numbers are on a steady decline. So I'm coming to you today here for this audience to say we have a requirement to help this segment. We need to apply emerging technology specifically to this segment. and try to build solutions for them. What do we need to focus on? Let's deliver meaningful insights and advice. There's no shortage of data. We've been focused a lot here at Finovate on solutions that leverage data, everything from artificial intelligence to others that in order to provide financial advice to customers and better guide them along their individual financial journeys. We have to emphasize the role and importance of digital tools. Not only are they users of digital, we know that they like it. They like online banking. Mobile banking is on its way, and it's their preferred channel of choice. We can also take advantage of the growing mobile adoption curve in order to provide solutions for that segment that are mobile first, mobile only, as that number creeps up. And finally, as we look towards the branch experience, we all know that branch numbers are going to shrink. That's not a shock. However, for those that do remain, there's an opportunity to reorient them. Are we going to use the branch to point folks towards digital solutions? We should. The branch is not a place to process transactions. However, there is an opportunity for certain segments of the population. And I'll circle back to my comment about small businesses. Folks like small businesses and baby boomers have a key opportunity to actually use the branch for something different, should they so choose, and the data shows that that is still their preference. So I stand before you today with really a call to action for the industry. We're surrounded by financial institutions, startups, mature players in the software space, investors, et cetera. And my call to action is this: let's come back to Finovate next year and see a host of solutions that are geared at an audience that really requires our financial help. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacob. So far, all of our analysts staying well clear of that bell at the end of the 7 minutes. We'll see if we can keep that rolling for the whole session. Up next, we have Jim Marouz.
Thank you. Good morning. How many of you currently use voice commands to transact business or simply to find out information on your phone? How many of you are owners of an Alexa device or a Google Home or some other voice digital assistant? In the last year, 26 million devices were sold by Amazon. This has expanded the marketplace significantly from where it was before and getting people more and more used to using voice devices and voice commands to transact their everyday business. This is the latest in a series of innovations that have come into the banking world and into our commerce section. People are getting more and more comfortable with the computer, with the mobile device, and with voice technology to do their everyday business. A lot of people will be surprised that 50 years now, it's gone from the introduction of the first computer to now virtual reality and voice commands. And as we look at this, we have to, as bankers, say, how do we keep ahead of that curve, or at least try to keep up with the curve? We've already seen financial institutions introduce voice technology into their general and simple banking solutions. Capital One, Amex, I think last week US Bank introduced some technology that's using that. Why? Because it's easier. Because technology has grown to a point where we can now use voice transactions and voice technology to do basic innovations and basic technology for transactions. This is being fueled by big data and by advanced analytics. As we apply data towards voice, it will allow us to not only accept commands, but eventually proactively provide advice. Instead of asking Alexa, what's my balance? We may get to the point where Alexa will actually tell us what our financial holdings are and the way transactions can be done. The overall goal and the reason why voice may take a higher plane as we go forward is because it makes daily life and banking simpler. Dan started the conversation today talking about the customer experience and how important it is to move the customer experience forward. We also heard from Allison about how important data is in making that all occur. And we heard from Jacob about how important it is for the baby boomers to be able to use the new technology. We have seen that the voice technology capabilities have improved tremendously from where they were before. What we have found out is that speech recognition, the ability to transact, the ability to communicate, has gotten far, far more sophisticated and capable. This is only going to improve over time and will make the ability to do banking with voice a thing that can be of the present. Right now, 51% of consumers use voice transactions and voice assistants in their cars. As we see, more and more cars are being equipped with Wi-Fi and with high-end digital technology. 39% of them do it at home. I can say in my situation, we have an Alexa device in the kitchen. We have an Alexa device in my office. In fact, we have 3 different Alexa devices in my office, which you have to kind of make sure you keep one off while you're talking to the other one. Otherwise, you get a kind of a poker game going on with all of them trying to answer the questions first. But I think what's important to realize is that as we're buying things, as we're transacting, voice is simpler, it can be as accurate, and it's a great way to apply advanced learnings. We're moving from the simple to the complex. We're moving from simple transactions such as weather and daily information and search to being able to actually use it for more complex transactions. And technology is coming out, which is driven by voice. In the next 10 years, more than 50% of all banking interactions will be using voice-first devices. So how do we move to there? I'm going to give you an example. We'll see how this works.
The weather is supposed to be warm with a slight chance of showers. And, wow, the Cleveland Indians won 5-2 last night against the New York Yankees. They are on a winning streak. How about some morning news?
Just my bank balances, please.
Here is a quick summary for you. The balance in your checking account is $1,547.43. The balance in your savings account has increased and is $8,223.22. The investment portfolio has not changed since yesterday, but 3 of your holdings had some advisor recommendations. Would you like me to send you these by email?
Yes, send to my business email, please.
Your calendar is pretty open today, but you have a lunch with John Williams at 11:45 a.m. Do you want me to make a lunch reservation for 2 at 11:45 a.m. at Brio Cafe? John loves the food there.
Yes, please.
Looks like John has some updates on LinkedIn, Facebook, and his Twitter accounts. Would you like me to email a summary?
Just text them to me, please.
How about an Uber car to drive you to lunch with John, so you can arrive at 11 a.m.? It will give you more time to talk.
Yes, please.
I can have an Uber car pick you up at 1:30 p.m. Does this sound good?
Please make it 1:15.
I just noticed that we are running low on milk, eggs, grated cheddar cheese, Fruit Loops, and sugar. Would you like me to reorder these items for delivery by 8 p.m. tonight?
Do not reorder the Fruit Loops.
Just a bit of a reminder, your wife said she would like lasagna for dinner tonight. I can order the ingredients and have them delivered at 5:30 p.m. Will this be okay?
Make that 6 o'clock, please.
You love the lasagna recipe you used last time from the Food Network. Do you want me to email it to you?
Yes, please.
How about a good matching wine with dinner tonight? I can have this delivered also. How does this sound?
Yes, please send a red, please.
Is there anything else I can do for you today?
Yes, could you order some flowers for my wife?
Sounds great. I will order an assortment of tropical flowers your wife likes, in the $40 price range for delivery by 6 p.m. this evening. Is there anything else?
No, that's perfect. Thanks.
Have a nice day, Jim. Don't forget the umbrella, just in case it rains. I will confirm our conversation by text message to your phone.
That could be the future of banking, where we're at the center of the entire universe of what the customers, making their customers' lives easier and engaging the other components. Thank you.
Well done, Jim. And there's the commentator's curse, the fact that I mentioned no bells going off. Naturally, the very next presentation, but a great demo, Jim. Thank you very much. Up next is Ron Shevlin.
Thank you. Get the slides going here. Great. My, how times have changed, huh? You know, it wasn't that long ago that the pundits were talking about the death of banks. And books were coming out with titles like The End of Banking and Bye Bye Banks. Now, in all fairness, it wasn't all doom and gloom. At least this guy put a question mark at the end of the title of his book. But about 18 months ago, the zeitgeist changed, and the prevailing meme became bank-fintech partnerships. That was going to be our way out. The future of banking was going to be bank-fintech partnerships. And so we started to see publications like these. Now, I've got to tell you that every time I hear somebody talking about bank-fintech partnerships, I can't help but think about the movie A Few Good Men with Jack Nicholson and, who's that guy, the good-looking guy? Kevin Pollak, that's right. But what I hear Jack saying is, you want partnerships? You can't handle partnerships. People, what are you thinking? Institutions with less than $50 billion in assets have no resources or skills to go out and build partnerships with any meaningful number of fintech companies. Even the big banks, the mega banks who can bring together the skills and resources really can't partner with enough fintech companies to move the needle on their business results. And what makes any of you think that these piddly little fintech companies have any skills to partner? Partnerships are not scalable. And by the end of next year, bank-fintech partnerships will hit the trough of that hype cycle. What's needed and what is emerging is a new business model, platforms. Now, unfortunately, this has a lot of different meanings, and you have heard this term platforms used probably hundreds of times over the past couple of days by presenters who've told you that they have platforms. Now, what they're talking about is they're using platform in the context of a technology construct. I'm talking about platforms in the context of a business model, a plug-and-play business model that enables both producers and consumers to connect, interact, create, and exchange value. Now, there are three key capabilities or components of becoming or being a platform. First is you must be a magnet. You must attract both producers and consumers to your platform. Second, you must be a matchmaker and match producers and consumers. That might be as simple as just having a search engine on your platform. Hopefully, it involves something a lot more sophisticated. The third piece is you have to have a toolkit to seamlessly connect those producers and consumers. And one of the best examples of a platform out there, of course, is Amazon. But it's helpful to remember that it's taken them 20 years to get there. They started off by building that magnet and matchmaker capabilities, becoming a B2C e-commerce website. And then they launched the Toolkit, AWS, and built that as a standalone business starting in around 2006, 2007. And since 2012, they've really executed on this platform strategy, really emerging and evolving from a B2C e-commerce website to a B2B2C commerce platform on their way to becoming a close to $500 billion business from a market capitalization perspective. So, in that meantime, they've also launched financial services like credit cards and merchant cash advances. So is Amazon going to buy a bank? Or, as rumored recently, acquire Capital One? Hell no! They're a platform. They want as many banks and financial services providers to interact through them as possible so that they can build out those platform capabilities. I'll tell you that it's a whole lot more likely that Amazon would acquire a digital account opening provider than acquire a bank. To tell you the truth, if I were at Amazon, I wouldn't even do that. I'd just hire Wade Arnold and he'd get the job done. Now, there are three important platformification trends that I need to tell you about. The first is what's going on with a lot of the large banks as they start to build out the toolkit capabilities to build on a platform strategy. So you see organizations like Citi launching the Developer Hub, BBVA with the API market, and Capital One with their Developer Exchange. they're beginning to develop those toolkit capabilities to enable the connections of providers and consumers, even though I don't see them doing a lot of building out that magnet or matchmaker capabilities, but they're starting with the toolkit. Second key platformification trend is what's going on with the marketplace lenders as they go through their transformation. As many of these marketplace lenders are starting to hit speed bumps and brick walls in their evolution of their business models, they are starting to transition to a platform strategy as well. And then you see organizations like Akuba, Kabbage, and LendKey recognize that it's about going deep in the lending stack to go vertical integration and not just be the front end. And many of these organizations already recognize that banks and credit unions are as much their customers where in previous times they were more competitors. In fact, if you look at what Kabbage is doing, they're already establishing a lot of connections for data with organizations like eBay, Stripe, Square, Amazon, Etsy, and PayPal, building out that toolkit capability on their small business lending platform. The third key trend that's going on here, I think, is actually one of the more interesting trends, and it's the emergence of a whole new set of vendors in the fintech space that I'm calling platform services providers. Organizations like Avoca, which has created the Avoca platform, which enables many different players that were involved in account opening to work with the Avoca platform, giving banks and credit unions more choice of who to plug into the account opening process. Organizations like Constellation, focusing on the credit union market, Fedor Solutions, building on the work done in Europe by the parent company. You saw FI-Span present yesterday. That's a great example of a merging platform services provider who is helping to sit on top of and integrate a lot of the core providers with a lot of ancillary services, and including new fintech players. That could not have been 7 minutes, because I was watching this and you guys are cheating me out of time, which is just fine anyway, because I was done.
Well done, Ron, and I promise you that clock doesn't move faster for you than for anybody else. That's the harsh reality of the Finovate experience, and I'm glad we're getting to see it on display a little bit here. Up next, we have Kevin Morrison. Go ahead.
Good morning. I want to, first of all, start with this time last year, I was a face in this crowd. I was working for a financial institution in the innovation area. And over the last year, I've transitioned to this role as analyst. And I'll have to tell you, as I was sitting there watching these folks go through their presentations, I have a whole new level of respect for what researchers and analysts do in this industry on a day-to-day basis, because it is not easy. But I was in the financial services industry for the last 25 years in the payments and retail banking. So have a fairly good idea of what happens, especially when we talk about the integration of AI, the integration of technology, omni-channel, all of those things. I have sat and listened to presentations, I've talked to fintech companies, I've discussed the opportunity for partnership, all of those things. So it's, well, and as you can see, I'm still kind of in my banker standard deck role where I put out an agenda so you can all follow along. And so I'm not even going to go through this, quite frankly. The context, as we all know, the consumers continue to migrate. This is not anything you haven't heard if you work in a financial services institution. Consumers continue to migrate from the financial activities, from physical channel, from branch call center. They're moving into the digital channel. We're all aware of that, and for any number of reasons, right? New account opening, customer service, all of that's happening today. What's at stake? IT Group did a survey of people in the United States and other countries, but in the United States, and they showed a 25% increase of millennials that checked their account. In 2016, the question was, how often do you check your account? And for those who check their either checking account or credit card account once a day, that number increased 25% in a year's time. So We all know that's coming. The ongoing digital transactions continue to grow. And we can see that here in DDA applications, checking account applications, credit card applications, moving out of the brick and mortar and the call center into the digital channels. With that comes the risk of the account takeover and application fraud. We can see the number there projected out that the instances will continue and the losses will continue. So the opportunity, we already heard it earlier, the opportunity is turning the transactional give and take into the relationship. And it's funny, when you talk about relationship, and you look at a lot of the sub-taglines in the marketing for a lot, large and small financial institutions, it's the relationship, building the relationship. And over the last couple of days, I've seen a lot of great presentations on chatbot, right? Robo-advisor, all of those things, and that's great. But I'm not clear, or I haven't seen how those types of, or that technology establishes and develops relationships, at least not in the financial services industry. So we've heard a lot about machine learning, behavioral analytics, predictive analytics, understanding through transactional what the customers are doing at any given time. We use these tools to also for fraud mitigation through data analytics, where we look at using detection through mobile devices, how secure is the mobile device, authentication, and we integrate all of these things to protect the identity, correct, and validate we are working with the actual customer. Consumers are willing to exchange data for fraud mitigation purposes. We can see here that when asked, how interested are you in sharing personal information to protect yourself against fraud, was the highest read. So what's missing, right? As we've mentioned earlier, it is the integration of technology and the chatbot and the ability to leverage that technology. But the fear is out there in the press, and we've seen it, right? The end of the human race by Stephen Hawking. He's no slacker, right? It's Stephen Hawking telling us this. Elon Musk voicing similar concerns. On the other side, we'd say we have on Insight, do not fear it. Don't worry about it. So what's missing? And Dan touched on it in his presentation. It is a human factor. It is leveraging the personal interaction. And the best way, quite frankly, for me to express this is in the financial institution, US Bank. I was doing research for a paper I'm working on, a report I'm working on, and I was out looking around. I have a number of accounts through a number of financial institutions. I went out to US Bank, and I looked at, was reading up on their rewards cards. And signed in, looked at it, took some notes, shut down. A couple hours later, I get a phone call. Local area code from US Bank. And my first thought is everybody's is like, oh no, what's going on? And it is Sally from down the street at the local branch. And she was just following up on the fact that I'd been out looking at particular products on the website. So this is something I've never experienced before in any bank. What they've done is they've integrated the digital channel. So, and you say to yourself, creepy? No. I think if it would have been somebody calling from a call center, an 800 number on my caller ID, a little creepy. But it was Sally, and she was calling from the branch down the street. And she was inquiring if I had any additional questions on the products I was actually doing research on. She commented on the fact that how long I've been a customer. She thanked me for being a customer, asked me if there was anything else she could do. She was not selling. She was not calling to say, come into the branch. She was just doing a follow-up. US Bank, as I'm sure other financial institutions have as well, they are leveraging their people for proactive activity using omni-channel type integration. They have a customer service screen that they are now able to proactively call out to their customers. So that, I think, is how I'm with Brian. We got gypped here. I'm sure that was. But financial institutions are doing that. They're integrating the technology. Thank you very much.
Nicely done. I think you guys are doing it on purpose just to see what it feels like now. That's hypothesis only anyway. Well, thanks, Kevin. Up next, we have Stessa Cohen. Go ahead, Stessa.
Imagine, if you will, it's an early spring day, say maybe March, and a woman, maybe one of you, get your utility bill, your electric bill. You noticed it's hotter, a little warmer than usual, than it usually is in March. And you open your bill, however you do that, I don't care, paper, digital, and you look at that bill number. Your palms get a little sweaty. If you're holding a smartphone, maybe you drop it. Hopefully it's not the glass case, right? Your face drains of blood, and you're like, how am I going to pay this bill? Because it's not just a little higher, it's 50% higher. So there are many things you can do right now. There's many things she can do. She can look and see, maybe she has a PFM fintech app that tells her what percentage of her bills she won't be able to pay this month, and maybe only 90% of her mortgage. The bank's going to love that. And all these red circles and negative amounts. She can go online, check her balance. She can look at her online bill pay and see which bills maybe she can put off paying. Maybe she'll call the utility company and ask for a payment plan, which is always a great way to spend a few hours. Maybe she'll call her bank or somehow find out about a consumer loan to pay not only her spring utility bills, but she's read some weather predictions. It's going to be even hotter during the summer. She's going to need a loan to cover all of that. In all of these activities, whether she's checking her balances to see if she can pay her bills this month, she is alone. She's out there fending for herself. How am I going to solve this problem, she asks herself. Maybe looking at the loan, she's going to create a spreadsheet, see which is better, a payment plan with the utility company or a loan, download some transactions. She accepts, maybe decides to go with the loan. Then she has to manage the money that comes in from the loan and put it to her utility bill, make sure she doesn't spend it for any other emergency, then pay that loan back, rejigger her budget, or maybe she's just going to forget about it. The fintechs, and actually the banks too, that are going to just transform banking at this point are those that are going to be able to enable digital empathy. All right, what is that? What is digital empathy? It's the ability to sense problems and needs that customers, not just consumers, but organizations that are customers of the bank have, and how they will impact that customer's life, their goals, their needs. Replacing the online banking and mobile banking with digital banking solutions were really great, really great. Reduced costs of sending the same old transactions out to your customers. Apps that have less friction and better design are easier to use. Improving processes like new account opening, even better, improves the customer experience, less customer confusion, and maybe even saves some money for the banks. But the future of fintech and the future of transformation for banks is not going to be about transactions, and even easier to use transactions. The future is going to be in digital empathy, being able to sense customer needs, anticipate those events like that high utility bill. So all right, what does that look like? In digital empathic fintech and banking, a single moment or business event or triggers empathic actions across the bank, not just in a single line of business. So where that May temperature comes in, the bank registers that data, does analytics across the bank, identifies customers through analysis not only of the data, but their personal data, with their permission, of course, identifies customers who might potentially need help paying their bills that month because of a high utility bill. Through the channel device of their choice, sends out a message, would you like help paying your electric bill? Customer, she says yes, and here the bank now offers solutions, not just one, loan, of course, but maybe also overdraft offers, maybe an opportunity to negotiate a payment plan with that utility company, right? That's external to the bank. Maybe also offer to a lower provider, switch her to a lower provider. They handle all the onboarding with a loan or a payment plan negotiation and all the payments. They'll also help her with her budget proactively. The utility getting this data can also connect to her home and communicate with her smart home and adjust her utility so that she doesn't heat her house too much or cool off too much so she can't afford it. So where does this leave fintechs? What are you going to need to be able to do, and what should banks be looking for? You can build empathic products and services, but you're going to need to have these kinds of capabilities. Digital connection everywhere, not just at the smartphone and the ATMs and the social messaging apps, but at branches, relationship managers, tellers even. Everything needs to be connected, people, places, and things. Be able to sense customer problems, goals, and needs in the data, in their actions, and their behavior. Be able to identify business moments, those events that are going to change the way their needs, the things that they need. Be able to analyze data in non-traditional ways. This is digital empathy is not about millennials. It's not about boomers. It's about customers. Enable the sharing of data across lines of business, across systems, IT business silos and organizations. Technology that enables collaboration across the bank enterprise and outside the enterprise. Why is this so important? Because I believe that digital banking initiatives, more than half of them by 2021, will fail. Why? Because they'll be unable to deliver an authentic customer experience that the customers trust. And this trust is important if you are going to not leave the customer fending for herself. Thank you.
You guys couldn't see it on that end, but she had 1 second left when you wrap it up. That's how it's done, Stessa. Well done. This has been an incredible session, and I'm sorry to say that we're coming up on the end of it. We have one analyst left. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over now to James Wester. James, your turn. Let's bring us home.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being up here with so many smart people and Ron. I'm going to go pretty fast. Oh, thank you very much. I'm going to go pretty fast here. It's hard for an analyst to fit anything in 7 minutes. So here we go. Buckle in. First, quick introduction of IDC. Since 1964, we've been tracking business spend across all verticals, all markets. We started out with our first project. Our first product was actually a spreadsheet tracking companies buying mainframes. Now we have 1,100 analysts worldwide who are tracking every vertical, every market, and every technology. Now, a good place for me to start is with what we call our third platform. This is IDC's model for the next delivery paradigm for technology. You know all these technologies well. It's mobile, it's social, it's cloud, it's big data. So what's really interesting is that around those innovation accelerators, we have what we call, around those core technologies, we have what are called our innovation accelerators. These are combinations of those core technologies that give us the really cool stuff we like to talk about, things like next generation security, robotics, and 3D printing. But it's becoming harder and harder, if not impossible, for companies, for a single company to do anything new or original, to do something with these technologies. It's really difficult even for these plucky startups that we saw over the last couple of days to wow us. What's more, our space, financial technology, has never been more competitive. This is just some of the largest vendors by share of multiple parts of the financial industry, or the financial technology industry. These are the companies that are also now competing with those plucky technology companies. The good news, though, is that financial services itself has never been more competitive as well. Now, you might be asking yourself, how is that good news? Because FIs understand that their competitive market and the value of digital transformation to lower costs and engage customers is very, very important, and they're beginning to put their money where their collective mouths are. Now, any good analyst will tell you taxonomy is an important thing. What are we really talking about? And I could show you, or I could read, actually, that definition of digital transformation, or what we define it at IDC, but it's a mouthful. What I would like to point out is that At no point in our definition of digital transformation do we use the word technology. Instead, it's about process, it's about strategy, and it's about an end-to-end change involving both the front, the middle, and the back office instead of the adoption of one technology or one application or one bright, shiny object. So now we get to the data. Data is IDC's middle name, of course. So what you see here is our most recent forecast on digital transformation spend for the US, and we're just talking about the US at this event. And we found that retail banks in the United States will spend $20.2 billion on hardware, software, services, and internal staff to develop and implement their DX initiatives in 2017. By 2020, that number grows to $36 billion. Now, a couple of things to note here. First, if you look, more than 60% of the digital transformation is about internal alignment and services. That's pretty impressive to me. I think I think we tend to think of digital transformation as being about software or about boxes with blinky lights, but it's not. Second, notice that this is a new priority for FIs. DX has been a growing priority for many years. Now, this right here is across the functions that you saw. You can see the 5-year compound annual growth rate. The CAGR on DX is impressive. Hardware and software do look a little bit big in this, but you have to remember that also those are smallest in dollar. However, it should be noted that the 5-year CAGR for IT services and for internal spend are both almost about 20%. Total 5-year CAGR for all of this digital transformation spend is 22.5% through 2020. Now that compares to IT spend's compound annual growth rate of only 4.8%. So clearly this is an important place where banks are beginning to pay attention. Now, across this, this right here is you will see that as a part of the entire spend, entire IT budgets, you'll notice that it's also growing as a percentage. This year, only a quarter of IT spend will be on DX strategies, but that grows to 40% by 2020. There's also another thing about this I think that's interesting is that some of those DX, some of the transformational projects that we would find in some of the earlier years will end up in the part that's non-DX. So you can see that it's actually becoming a more important part of everything that banks are doing. So where are they actually spending all that money? That's a great question. You're a perceptive audience, and I'm glad you asked that. This right here is by functional area. And I think what's really impressive about this is, first off, if you notice, a lot of the spend is in back office. It's in infrastructure. It's in those parts of the bank that don't really get as much attention as we sometimes like to talk about. In fact, if you notice, $11 billion by 2020 is just going to risk. That's risk, that's compliance, that's governance. That's a really unsexy part of bank spend. But what I would like you to think about is, of the companies that we talk about here, and of the companies that have presented, how many of them are customer-facing? Customer-facing is actually a very small part. The opportunities that present themselves right now for the companies that are trying to take part of this budget, that actually want to partner with banks and partner with some of those large companies, is that it is in that unsexy part. It is in that part of the world where you were talking about infrastructure. Because the technology leaders in banks understand that customer engagement strategy for the future is actually reliant on architectures that are safe, that are secure, that are reliable, and that's where they're putting their money right now. So, does that mean that there isn't any place for customer-facing? Does that mean that there is no way for us to start talking about some of the cool things like voice or wearables or any of the other customer-facing stuff we've looked at? No, that's not the case. The fact of the matter is that, and I would give some advice to you, is supply solutions that fit for the banks. The banks are right now, especially the large banks, do have DX strategies in place. And what they would really like then is for those customer-facing initiatives, the products, the wearables, the voice, the AI, to fit within those strategies that they've already developed. Also think about this as long-term partners. This is a long-term process. This is something that especially smaller and mid-sized banks will be needing help across the entire digital transformation journey. And finally, build staff as well as technology. There are a lot of you that are vendors in this audience that can provide some of the resources, especially on the personnel side, that I think you can access that banks maybe can't. And then finally, and I'm going to get the bell here in about 2 seconds, just as the last analyst on the stage, I just want to say to you who are in the audience, to the folks who are on the stage, thanks for doing what you do. because you make being an analyst in this space an absolute joy. It is a fun space, it is a fantastic space, and it's an exciting space, and I thank you all for being a part of it.